Time to abandon ship.
Oh no!
Here we go!
Can I persuade you to join us for a drink? It's a tradition.
Here, here.
Jar Jar, homie, my main man, quickly. Before the Separatists attack, get into the escape pod.
Right! This is escape, then we're the pod.
Welcome back to Star Wars Escape Pod and another episode of Rebels Talk. This is Rebels Talk Part 18, and we are diving headfirst into Season 4 of Star Wars Rebels, Episode 5, 6, 7, and 8. That is Occupation, Flight of the Defender, Kindred, and Crawler Commandeers. So big thank you to everyone who has stuck with us so far in our journey to Ahsoka with our chronological viewing through Star Wars Rebels. And with me today in the Escape Pod is your esteemed co-host Blake. And together, we're going to be breaking down these episodes and more, taking you way back to Star Wars Rebels. Let's get into it.
Another happy landing.
Hello and welcome back.
Hello. Yes, good to be back as always.
We are almost
Hello
at the
there.
very end. Yes, hello there, and we are almost at the very end of Star Wars Rebels. It's been quite a journey, but by the time this episode drops, it will Ahsoka episode 1 and 2 will have premiered on Disney Plus. Crazy to think about.
It is crazy to think about.
Yeah, we lost the
'Cause
race.
Yeah, but it's a noble effort. We even tried to speed up the recordings, but it was just the release order still wouldn't make it in time anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to compete with Disney when they decide to
Schedules.
change the schedule like a week before. But yeah, I mean, hey,
Yeah, what the heck is with that? That just threw off so many plans.
That's so crazy. But well, today we got some interesting episodes. I wouldn't say they're standout, but well, we'll get into it. They're all right. Season 4, episode 5, 6, 7, and 8. These were
5, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah. These were well, the first two here are actually kind of set because the Rebels Recon episode is actually combining the two together. So what I'll do is read the stats for each episode separately and read the description as one paragraph, and then I'm gonna mentally combine my notes together here. So simultaneously, we're going to be talking about the double special, even though it's not a part 1 and part 2. Full spoilers ahead. For those of you who have not seen Star Wars Rebels Season 4, Episode 5, 6, 7, or 8, we're now going to be talking about Episode 5 and 6 together as one, and we'll just kind of dive right into it and make some connections and more as we've done for the whole series so far. And I've had a really good time going through all this, so looking forward to the next set of 4.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because it's feeling more and more of the excitement and pacing that we had towards the end of the Clone Wars series.
Yeah.
So it's funny that now they're even combining the Rebels Recon to put them together, because we're getting more arcs even if they're not officially arcs.
Yeah, it's so crazy because even though I'm trying to remember now which. Yeah, we'll obviously get into just how good these episodes are, but I can tell you straight up right now, most of the episodes in season 4 so far from this point onwards have been really, really good. And
No, I agree.
And the quality difference of the storytelling is just improved so much, and it's too bad really, because it's the end of the show. And I would have
I
liked
think
to have
that's why.
Yeah, well, I would have liked to have seen this pacing and this just kind of richness kind of delivered more consistently throughout the whole series. But I mean, it's a rewarding ending, and the fact that Ahsoka is essentially Rebels season 5, as an extension of what all goes on this show. A lot more of what we're going to be getting into over the next couple episodes of Rebels Talk will have a lot more to do with the relevance of that series. So I'm really looking forward to just kind of even more so every single time now that we talk about these episodes on Rebels Talk. The excitement kind of goes up a notch because it has just that much more to do with the segue into Ahsoka. So with that said, let's get into it, shall we? Season 4, Episode 5, this is Occupation, and Season 4, Episode 6, Flight of the Defender. Air date for both of these episodes was October 30th, 2017. They premiered on the same day, and the director for Occupation was Stuart Lee. The writer was Christopher Yost, and for Flight of the Defender, the director was Saul Ruiz, and the writer was Dave Filoni and Stephen Melching. So, Occupation, the summary reads, the rebels are informed by Ryder Azadi that the Empire is building a new and improved version of the TIE Defender. Ezra and the Ghost crew depart for Lothal, using Vizago to smuggle them in because the Empire has severely tightened its grip around the planet and nearly crushed the local rebel cell. They find the environment ruined from the Empire's activities, and that some acquaintances like Old Joe, who were arrested and executed for aiding the rebels, identified and chased. Ezra's crew finds the unexpected aid from Ezra's old academy friend Jai Kell and Azadi himself, who ferry them to safety, but are sorely disappointed to hear that the Rebel Alliance is unable to execute a liberation strike on Lothal. Ezra tries to stay optimistic by telling them that they can destroy the TIE Defender factory by working together, though Azadi remains skeptical due to having witnessed the capabilities of the new TIE Defender. The summary for Flight of the Defender reads, the Ghost crew scouts an Imperial airfield where the new TIE Defender is being tested. Sabine hits upon the idea of stealing its flight data recorder to obtain the information the rebels need about the TIE, but unfortunately, Grand Admiral Thrawn appears to witness a combat demonstration of the new fighter. Cornered, Sabine steals the fighter to get herself and Ezra to safety, but due to an installed kill switch, the fighter ends up stranded on the hills of Lothal. While hiding the TIE's hyperdrive for later retrieval, and then trying to evade the Imperial search parties, Ezra catches several unexpected glimpses of a white Loth Wolf, a rare predatory species. Eventually, the Loth Wolf appears before him, sends Sabine to sleep, and carries them back to their friends, only to disappear as mysteriously as it had appeared, leaving Ezra with a strange parting message. Doom to ponder over. And that being said, this is Rebels Recon.
In this episode, our heroes finally return to Lothal for good. What do you think this means to Ezra?
I think it means a lot to him because he's on home territory, and this is something that he's been talking about since the beginning, is helping the people of Lothal. This season gets so interesting with what Lothal, the planet, is actually capable of. How the Force kind of lives through Lothal, and the presence of it gets even bigger. And it's cool because we're constantly bouncing around, and now to be one place for an extended period of time is going to be pretty fun.
We're back on Lothal in the occupation, but the planet's very different from how we left it. How has the Imperial occupation changed since season 1?
Now Lothal is under martial law. Most importantly because it is really sort of a wartime factory. Every resource, every bit of personnel, all of the civilian population is being conscripted to work into Thrawns factories to build a TIE Defender.
A lot of the population, I think, now thought, well, the Empire is giving us safety and security through militarized police force and building these weapons. Now they've seen the other side of that, which is that none of that has any interest in actually benefiting them or protecting them because they live a life of fear. And you're never free when you live a life in fear. For Ezra, it's difficult because this is his home, but it's also helping him to focus on what's most important, which are these people that live here and what can he do for them.
It was really fun watching the reactions to the trailer where people assumed that the planet that they were seeing wasn't Lothal because it looked so different. That is the matte painting that we've always used for Lothal. Lothal. It's just been updated to have way more cloud cover and sort of fires and everything. It was meant to be completely just ravaged and devastated and burnt.
Our heroes finally returned to Lothal for good. What does this mean to Hera?
To come back home and defend that land, I think, is important to Ezra, and it's grown to be important to Kanan as well. And I think Hera respects that. And it sort of feels like there's so much that's incomplete in this world for them that feels like a kind of completion. It's satisfying for her, and I think she really hopes she can save it.
Lothal represents some pretty important things for Zeb, I think. His time on Lothal and meeting Ezra and the crew gave him a sense of normalcy and sort of gave him a sense of family that he had abandoned. I don't think he ever thought he'd feel that again. And so I think he feels a connection to Lothal in a pretty profound way.
We see the upgraded and even more dangerous TIE Defender in Flight of the Defender.
Yes.
What makes the TIE Defender elite, the ultimate starfighter?
The speed at which it can move. You get to see the TIE Defender moving like super fast and everyone realizing like, oh my God, this thing could really turn the tide.
It's a combination of speed and shields. So you can't just hit it once and blow its wing off. It can take several hits. It's the even more advanced version, which would really wreak havoc for the Rebellion because they're banking on the fact that they have a fewer number of ships, but they last longer.
If the Empire had invested more in the Defender than they did in the Death Star program, do you think that the original trilogy would have gone differently?
I do. I think it really would have turned the course of everything because they would have had a ship that could actually go in hyperspace, still be as good a fighter as what it was, and I think they personally would have torn the Alliance apart.
It's a testament to Thrawn's intelligence. Thrawn is really about winning the war. He doesn't want to necessarily destroy his enemies if he can get them to surrender.
The Death Star is a tempting thing to destroy worlds. The fear that can inspire to the Emperor and Tarkin and Krennic is a much more persuasive argument than building what they see as fighters. It took quite a lucky shot to take down the Death Star in the beginning. No one really was counting on there being a Luke Skywalker. So you never know how Thrawn would have dealt with using the Death Star. It's hard to say. The fact of the matter is that a weapon in Thrawn's hand is dangerous. It almost doesn't matter what it is.
What went into creating the design of the Loth Wolves?
First of all, Dave loves wolves. We are all very well aware of how much love Dave has for wolves. So when we found out that wolves were going to be on the show, it was a huge deal everywhere because it was like, oh my God, we got to make this wolf and it's got to be great.
Wolves and animals are traditionally very challenging to do in animation correctly. So in production, all of us were very nervous when Filoni brought this up. We had to make sure that the wolves looked realistic, but still stylized in our Rebel style.
They're pretty specific. Even a Loth cat doesn't necessarily look exactly like a cat. Throughout the movies, a wampa isn't exactly a polar bear or a gorilla, but you can sort of see what the analogy might be. It's sort of always been that way with Star Wars creatures, so the wolves were a little bit more specific than you would typically see.
It's this thing that has been dropped right into our show that I think single-handedly added a new pivot point for the direction of the characters as well as the look and complexity of the show as well, because we had to figure out, well, how do you interact with the fur on the wolf? Hair is really complex because it depends on the animation, and because of our timeline, it's very difficult.
We had 416 different controls for the fur on the wolf to be able to move each individual little tuft and everything.
Wow.
That was sort of the beginning of it, and then we did walk cycles and run cycles. What we finally came up with, I think, really works well. I'm actually really happy with how we finally came up with something.
They're a long play as far as what they are. They were a very difficult thing to do because I think that things like these wolves can be challenging for some viewers. The wolves are definitely tied into something mystical. So there's a lot there, I hope, to unpack and discover. By some people, wolves are seen as a terrible thing and something to be feared, and by others, a positive thing and something that brings balance to the environment. They are almost a nature of the Force to me, of a good and an evil and a balance within them.
All right, well, there you go. That's the Rebels Recon for both of those episodes.
Man, they stole one of my first notes, which was that Dave loves wolves.
Yeah, yeah, that's a big deal to him. Wolves have always been a huge thing. That's why, was it Commander Wolf is like his favorite clone. That's why he's one of the 3 that he decided to save.
I think he designed him, didn't he? That was like his commander.
Yeah, I think he designed the wolf that goes on their pauldrons, if I'm not mistaken. But I could be wrong about that.
Oh, okay. I thought it was more personally. I don't know. Maybe it's just things I've heard. I thought we discussed, so maybe I'm making it up. I guess I thought maybe he had more control. Like he designed Wolf from scratch, as opposed to the other commanders, who I think were more a combination of like him and George.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense to me. I mean, yeah. I honestly, anything to do with the Wolf and Star Wars, like Dave's probably got something to do with it.
Yep, for sure.
It's incredibly nostalgic to. I know it's only been like a couple weeks, and we've all seen the show. Like, well, you and I have seen the show before multiple times, but for those of you who have kind of stuck with our pace, impressively so, this entire time, it must be very nostalgic to go back to Lothal, even though it's been a short while we've kind of been watching these episodes, and over the last 2 months, just kind of powering through the series. It must be kind of nostalgic to be revisiting Lothal in such a different light, in such a different perspective, because the state of this planet is completely destroyed. Like the Empire's come in.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, and we've seen this happen in Andor. We've seen this happen in the Bad Batch. We've seen this happen in Kenobi, I think, as well. And it's a typical kind of Empire thing to go into a planet and suck it dry and really destroy it in a way.
Just take all the resources and then just leave it as this empty husk.
Right. And it's Lothal, reminds me of much. What did it say? Does it remind you of, like the prairies, I guess, would you say?
Yeah, it's definitely what they're going for. It's like grasslands and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's generally a very peaceful place. There's lots of like blowing grass. Seems like there's a lot of probably farming done on this planet. So yeah, very prairie-like, very Midwest-like.
Yeah,
without the burden of the cold winters.
Very, very kind of open and
like
peaceful, and yeah.
Yeah, it's like the whole planet is like a big wheat field.
Yeah, and there's something kind of simple about it. I mean, it is simple, but there's something kind of contently gratifying about how simple it is. And I think Ezra, being born and raised there, this is his home, right? So like seeing it in such a state of destruction and burning, and there's no more farming going on because it's all dead and gone, and it's almost like a traumatic sight to see, for someone who connects so deeply on the with this environment.
Yeah, it's like his entire home has just been burned and destroyed. Like, I couldn't imagine. Like, I'm just thinking, if I were to go back home and there's like a big fire that came through and just destroyed everything, like,
yeah, smoke in the air, the air's black.
Oh man, there'd be
fire everywhere. Like
it'd be hard to imagine.
Yeah, crazy, right? Like,
people are all in like shelters or have left.
Yeah, or dead, executed because they tried to defend their home. Anything, right?
Oh man, that's crazy.
And that's Ezra, right? And it's kind of like, I love the fact that even though the first season, it's just like, oh come on, can we just get out of Lothal already? Like, but at this point in the series, though, it's a welcome sight. And I think it's only a welcome sight.
That's how it works, man.
Yeah, but it's only a welcome sight, I think, because it's in a different state, right? Like, we remember it to be a certain way, but now it's I think what makes it a gratifying moment is because it's destroyed. It's because we know it to be of a certain, look, and it's like
that. And I think also we've earned it because we spent so much time, almost 2 seasons on Lothal, especially the first season. I feel like you never left, so it kind of got exhausting.
Right.
But I think that also created this relationship with the planet and understanding of the planet and what it's traditionally supposed to be. And so now seeing that distinction and seeing the vileness that the Empire has cast upon it, it just has like a whole nother level. You have so much more empathy for it because of the relationship they've already built with this planet.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. The sewers are well, the sewers show up in this episode, and I don't want to dwell on the sewers, but I noticed that they were empty. And you know, they're just these giant tunnels that the main characters, our heroes, are trying to escape through. Did you notice that they referred to it as the sewer, and
The
it was
sewers.
like there was no water or anything that they were stepping on?
I didn't think about that. That's a good point. There's nothing there.
It's
There's
just dry tunnels.
Because is it Disney, so they can't put like excrement?
Well, I would at least expect like some water. I mean, like I'm not expecting to see like floating excrement in the pipes or anything like that. But like, I mean, however that would be realistic. But like, you know, I would expect something like some sort of water or whatever, like murky water at least.
Just one duty. Just put one duty down there. Whenever we think of sewers, I think we tend to think of like Indiana Jones and Last Crusade, right? And he's going through the sewer cave or whatever.
Yeah.
Where there's like brick half tunnel and there's a giant flowing stream of, you know, bad stuff. And
yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Instead, it's just this completely
just
abandoned tunnel.
Yeah. Yeah, like, well, the only reason why I kind of...
Weird do they call it that?
Yeah, well, the only reason why I kind of noticed it was because I think one of the characters, I think it was Zeb or somebody, they were like, oh, the sewers, like, yeah. You know, and then they get down there and there's nothing there. It's like, what? Anyways.
I guess there's nobody left, so it's all dried out.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. What I thought was...
Maybe that's the first place the Empire burned.
Yeah, exactly. What I thought was cool was a returning character to the series was Jai Kell, and this was the other boy that Ezra befriended in the arc from season 1, where he goes undercover as a Imperial cadet, and it was cool to see that he came back and that he actually kind of stayed on Lothal and managed to kind of work his way into the rebel cell that was happening on Lothal. And, you know, it makes me think of Zer and like where he is. And it's been a while since, it's been a while since we talked about Zer Leonis. But, you know, and a reminder for anyone out there who wants to kind of follow up with that story, make sure you check out the Servants of the Empire junior novel books. There's 4 of them, and it overlaps with season 2, I think, and season 3. And I believe the final book ends between season 3 and 4, or completely kind of goes off on its own track and could overlap with the events of season 4. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. We're not going to kind of go into depth with that story in the Rebels Talk series, but, you know, I just wanted to bring it up again. You know, now that Jai has showed up, you know, just a quick reminder, if anyone does want to follow up on that story with Zer, you know where to look. That the book series is great. I highly recommend it. And that was all I got for this.
I'm glad they put Jai in it, but admittedly, even with the introduction where Ezra's like, "Oh, Jai, I haven't seen you since whatever," it still took me a second to think about who he was. And
he looks different,
like when we last saw him, whatever.
Well, they
looks
all
different.
They all look older.
And this is the fastest I've ever watched this series, so that helped give me context. I'm trying to remember, you know, what happened.
Right.
Last time, because I guess like I've kind of like half paid attention a few times through the show, while you know doing other stuff.
Yeah.
But the last time I really paid attention was Release, which means it was like 4 years apart between season 1 and season 4. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's tough sometimes with those kind of like one-shot characters that show up for a single episode and then they don't show up again for like 2 seasons and then they're there again. It's like, okay, who's this again? You know. And quite frankly, Game of Thrones was like that for me, because I was watching Game of Thrones as it was coming out. And, you know, at some point I
couldn't do it, dude. I
got just so tired of rewatching all the previous seasons again before the new season came out. So at some point I just stopped doing that. And then it was like, oh my gosh, like, who is that again? Like, why are they there
Yeah.
again? You know, like it was just like it got really confusing because you know. But I got so sick of
I
binging
gave up.
binging the same show every year. It's you know, it sucks. Like I can see why somebody would want to wait for a show to finish before starting it. You know, because like I've spoken to people who have told me that, not in relation to Rebels or Clone Wars, but just in general, like with any series at all. It's like, you know, it's like I recommend a show and it's like, oh, is it done yet? And it's like, no, it just came out. And they're like, oh, okay, I'll just wait until it's over and then I'll binge it. Like, wow.
I'm
okay.
gonna wait until Disney is done making Star Wars and then just watch all of it at once.
Now that's the spirit. Yeah.
Just never watch Star Wars again as you're waiting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's pretty much all the notes I got for this first section here. Did you have anything to add on to that, or should we move on to the next one here?
One thing that really stood out to me is we're starting to get more into the relationship between Kanan and Hera. They're kind of, you know, dropping like little piecemeals, like raindrops one at a time, right? Drip, drip, drip. There's a romance just to remind people, because holy smokes, was there nothing for a long time.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
So I'm trying to remember.
I think you're thinking of
if
episode 7.
This is the episode where
we'll get into that in the next episode.
One.
Yeah. Part 2.
Okay.
Part 2 of this story arc, though, Flight of the Defender. I only have 2 notes for this one. One of them is when Zeb sees the TIE Defender. It's kind of flying around, he doesn't see it flying around, but they tell him about it, and he's like, "I'll believe it when I see it," kind of thing. But like, I'm pretty sure that like Ezra fought them that one episode with Hera and the Ghost, and I was trying to remember if Zeb was there, and I don't know, maybe he wasn't, but it was like, well, like why would he say something like that? You know, it's like, do you seriously not believe? I don't know. Maybe it was just like
it doesn't seem that far fetched, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking this or whatever. But it was just like, he said that, and I was like, wait, what? Like, did they not tell you about these things like before? Anyways, the Loth Wolf, which is kind of the bigger conversation here. The Loth Wolf, which hasn't been seen, Ezra says, in hundreds of years, probably since settlements arrived on Lothal, is my suspicion. But it reveals itself to Ezra.
Wait, does that mean that people haven't lived on Lothal for more than 100 years?
I don't know.
The galaxy's super old.
Well, the cave paintings that Ezra finds with Kanan depict the Loth Wolves with Jedi, you know, once upon a time on the planet. So I suspect, you know, at some point in the age of the High Republic, you know, in the age of expansion, that was probably when the first sort of settlers or kind of people, you know, came to Lothal and you know, began interacting with the wildlife there. And you know, it's possible. My suspicion would be that a certain you know, mystical creature, you know, in the way that it is, would probably hide itself away after, you know, people started showing up, you know, with ships and farming and this and that, and you know, all of a sudden they don't have their massive safari of plains of grass anymore, you know, to run around freely. Now all of a sudden someone's growing crops, right? So like I think it's kind of just it's not necessarily like fact or anything. I'm just kind of like throwing a theory out there that maybe that's why they haven't shown up in hundreds of years. You know, it's because maybe it's kind of hinting this is when the planet was starting to be settled, you know, a couple hundreds of years ago. I don't think people have been on Lothal for thousands and thousands of years. Like that just, to me, that doesn't sound incredibly.
Probably not, unless they've just been really simple people for a long time.
Right. So I don't know, like the idea that, either that or because it is a farming world, so there's not a whole lot of infrastructure, and just the way that the cities are so simple and small, but not like run down, kind of gives me the idea that it is kind of a newer settled planet. So yeah, I thought it was a little interesting piece of information there that he provides. But this wolf, though, he reveals itself to Ezra and Sabine in a time of need. And it can sort of
because I think that kind of shows why they haven't been seen for so long. I think they're so tied to the Force that when all this stuff showed up, disturbances and maybe
that's what brought them back out again.
That, and I think also when everyone showed up, they had probably sent them away because they didn't want to be around it.
Maybe.
But now maybe the Force is guiding them to come back, you know?
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? They can speak too. They seem to have an ability to kind of whisper sort of words, right? And I thought it was such a crazy...
they can only really say Kanan's real name. That's it.
Well, but this one said sleep. He said sleep, and then Sabine falls asleep after he says so. He can like kind of whisper a spell, like a sleeping spell, upon people, and it works. Like these creatures are so kind of out of the bounds of any kind of consistency that they really are like sort of this mystical kind of wondrous creature that, you know, they're quite fascinating. And you know, it's pretty cool to see them. Like, you know, I hope we get to see them again at some point. But it's a neat, you know, it's a neat thing. And you know, these they're very spiritual. Like I would imagine that they're very like in tune with the will of the Force, you know, because like you say, like they show up kind of like when Lothal is kind of hitting its rock bottom state, you know. And
I wonder if they're also showing up now because there's Jedi, because they might feel the other sense of other Force users, because there hasn't been Jedi on Lothal for a really long time, even with the Republic.
Right.
Probably not since that Jedi temple was being used.
Yeah, and
maybe that was 100 years ago.
Well, also Ezra has such a special connection with animals, as we've come to learn very early on in the series. And the wolves, as you kind of hinted just before, was that they, you know, they do have a parting message for Ezra, and they say doom, and it's something to ponder over, and we will talk about what that is. But yeah, it's just like, it's one of those things. It's like these animals have a special connection with Kanan, you know, in a different way. They also have a special connection with Ezra, and simultaneously they have an even bigger kind of rooted connection with the planet that they're a part of. And we come to realize what that is in the coming episodes, you know, with how they get around the planet, first off, but then secondly, kind of their special cave that they've kind of been hiding out in this whole time. And in addition to that, the connection with that and the Jedi Temple. And we'll kind of get into all that stuff when it comes up in the relevant episode that we can talk about it. But yeah, it's pretty cool. I really like these wolves a lot. And that's pretty much all I got for this episode. So anything to add on that one? Or should we give some Pablo points and poodoos to these guys?
Two things. One small one, which was actually for the first half of this arc, which was they're playing the Imperial March over the radio. And I'm not sure how I feel about that.
Oh, well, was it the one from Empire Strikes Back, or was it the one that they made for the series? The, what's it called?
Good question.
March of the Empire or something? You know what I'm talking about?
It's probably that one.
Yeah.
It's still the ba, 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 bum, ba, ba, bum, ba, ba, but it was over the radio inside the cantina. So I guess that means the Imperial March is an in-universe song?
Well, they have the, like...
I think we've talked about this, but I'm not sure if it was on the show.
Yeah, we talked about it when they have the parade. I think it's in season 1. Empire Day.
That's right.
Empire
so
Day.
they reused it then. I still feel really weird about it.
It's a different key though. Like it's in a different key.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'm just trying to pull it up here. So like the original.
Oh my gosh.
Let's see here. Glory of the Empire, is that what it is? Yeah, let's check this out. This one?
I think it was more the actual Imperial March.
Oh, was it?
I think so. It wasn't as a paradey. It was just kind of like the classic Imperial March. It was a little bit slower than normal.
Interesting. Was it in the same key or was it a different key?
Hard to say now. Trying to remember.
Yeah. Well.
So as funny as you telling me that if it's in a different key, then it's in universe. Because the only other time we've seen that is when they play the Emperor's theme at the end of Phantom Menace. But it's for the Naboo celebration.
Right.
Which is an in-universe song.
Yeah, that's right.
So I guess it's just a thing?
I guess so. So good. All right. Pablo Points of Poodoos. What would you give the set of these?
No, hold on. One more thing. This is a big peeve of mine.
All right.
So, the start of the second episode, we find at least some of the ghost crew are in Ezra's freaking tower again. Why has the Empire not blown this thing up?
I don't know. That's a good point because Callus was there using it.
They just keep going there.
Yeah, they just keep going back to the same spot. I don't know how they keep on fire. It's like, well, I feel like they would have stuck a camera.
So the only building outside the city.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something.
So anything. Yeah, that's a good point. Lazy.
Yeah, I was annoyed by that. I feel like they should have went anywhere else. I get that it's the only building outside of the cityscape, but that is all the more reason that it should be under Imperial Guard.
Yeah.
I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. I feel like that may have been a writer's oversight.
Probably.
But it was definitely it stood out a lot to me.
Well, we have a pretty iconic scene in the finale episode, which is also, I think, maybe in that same spot. I don't know. I can't remember exactly if it's the same tower or not, but maybe Lothal has a few of these towers. It's like a radio.
I think all of them are Ezra's room.
And all of them have an Ezra in it. What would you rate this episode?
Well, I think first we need to explain what a Pablo Point and a Pablo Poodoo is.
Right. All right. So everybody, those of you who have...
we should probably just record this. Just play it every episode.
Yeah, I probably should. All right. So score system, Pablo Points or Poodoos. It's a score of 7. 3 Pablo Poodoos is the absolute worst of the worst of the worst. Moving up from there, you got 2 Pablo Poodoos, 1 Pablo Poodoo, and then a Bendu. Bendu, as you know, the one in the middle is 50%. And then moving up from there, you got 1 Pablo Point, 2 Pablo Points, and 3 Pablo Points. 3 being the best of the best of the best. So, in the positive range, you got good, great, extraordinary. In the negative range, you got bad, terrible, and then just exhaustingly the worst thing you've ever seen. So
it's a good way to describe a poodoo.
Yeah, that's a poodoo. Yeah. So what would you give these ones? They're just as a set. They come as a pair.
As a set.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. StarWars.com is selling these as a set on Rebels Recon. So what do we give these guys?
Well, it's interesting because I liked it when I watched it, but then seeing the following episodes get better and better, it almost seems less good in comparison.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I don't want to take away from how these episodes were, because of how good the later ones were. But I would say
it's still so much better than the first 2 seasons.
It's not, yeah, and it's not like bad filler. Like it's good story, right? Like we're now getting rich story happening on Lothal in a way that we haven't before. And it all has something to do with the where this season is going, like where the finale's headed.
Oh yeah.
So it's building it's building
defenders and whatnot.
Yeah, it's building the action that's kind of taking place right there, and it's all actually, it's not one shot stuff. It's all flowing together. So I would give this set probably 1.5 Pablo points.
Really? Okay, I thought you go a little higher than that. But
I thought it was better than good, but I wouldn't say it was great. I'm not itching to watch Flight of the Defender again. I'm not itching to watch the runaway scene with Ezra and Jai, on Lothal, for like another. It was good story. It was cool revisiting old places and old characters, seeing the updated, Lothal that we've come to know just be absolutely destroyed. Like, it had good feeling to the episodes, and I think it earned some bonus points for that. But I don't think like they're not like exactly great episodes.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I'll take your 1.5, and just with the knowledge of Rebels Recon that they hand animated the wolves' hair blowing around. They didn't sim that. They actually hand animated that.
Yeah, that's painful.
It was a lot of work, which that's pretty impressive. So I'm gonna bump it up to 1.8.
1.8. All right. Sounds good. Cool. All right. And these next two also come as a set on Rebels Recon. So let's talk about these as a pair as well.
I think Andy Gutierrez is just getting lazy.
Yeah, getting lazy. Yeah. Yeah, they're trying to save the budget on StarWars.com or something.
It's because they released on the same day, November 6th, even though they're one-off stories.
Exactly, yeah. Even though they're...
Interesting. Is this whole season?
Season 4? Yeah, it's kind of interesting because like November 6th, like these two came out on the same day on November 6th, and then the previous two both came out on the same day on October 30th. So even though it was a shorter season, and it seems to me that they're also like kind of rapid firing these things out as quickly as
they're
possible.
rushing it for some reason.
So what's interesting is the second part of this arc. Well, technically, both of these episodes simultaneously, but specifically the second episode. So episode 8, Crawler Commandeers, is the last episode to take place in 1 BBY. And we're not super far off from the release of The Last Jedi. So my theory is that they were trying to just kind of get the show out as quick as possible so that it didn't distract from the release of their theatrical film,
or the other way around, because this won't distract from The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi will definitely distract from Rebels.
Yeah, that exactly, right. So that's just my theory, but who knows? Okay, so let's talk about these as a set. This is season 4, episode 7, Kindred, and season 4, episode 8, Crawler Commandeers. Kindred came out November 6, 2017, on the same day as its counterpart, Crawler Commandeers. The director for Kindred was Sergio Paz. Writers included Dave Filoni, Henry Gilroy, and guest stars Warwick Davis. Crawler Commandeers, directed by Bosco Ing, and writers were Matt Michnovitz, and guest stars Seth Green. Warwick Davis famously, I believe he plays the character Rukh, which is Thrawn's right-hand man, his assassin. And in Crawler Commandeers, Seth Green, I believe, plays the Weasley Trandoshan, who we meet on the Mining Guild crawler ship. So that being said, let's read some summaries, and then we'll listen to Rebels Recon. So, Kindred. Ezra, Jaikel, and Zeb move to secure the TIE Defender's hyperdrive before the Imperial recovery team can find it. But Thrawn has already dispatched an additional helper for the search, Rukh, an assassin and unerringly accurate tracker. As Zeb takes the hyperdrive to safety, Ezra and Jai end up being chased by Rukh. They elude him with much difficulty, but a tracking beacon Rukh attached to their speeder leads Governor Price to the Ghost Crew's hideout. While Hera and Chopper evacuate to Yavin with the stolen flight recorder, the rest of the rebels face the incoming Imperials to cover their retreat. Just before the two groups clash, the white Loth Wolf reappears and leads them into a hidden tunnel complex imbued with the Force. Walking mysterious paths, the rebels inexplicably find themselves in a hidden settlement halfway across the planet, which was visited in ancient times by the Jedi who erected the secret temple on Lothal, and discover that the Loth Wolf is a messenger of the Force, here to tell them of a more sinister goal pursued by the Empire. Crawler Commandeers. After the Lothal rebels have taken shelter in the ancient settlement, they discover a mining guild ore crawler stripping Lothal's surface for raw materials passing by, and decide to hijack it to establish contact with Hera and the Yavin rebel base with its communicators. However, the crawler's captain shuts down the vehicle and raises the alarm, and as Sabine works to reactivate it, Kanan and Zeb discover a number of slaves in the hull, among them Vizago, who was sold to the guild by the Empire. Working together, the rebels and the former slaves waylay an incoming Imperial patrol investigating the distress call and prevent the captain from destroying the crawler. In the meantime, Hera, unwillingly to wait any longer, inspires Rebel Command to conduct an immediate assault on the factory where the TIE Defender is being produced. And after communication is established, Ezra's team agrees to coordinate the impending assault from the planet's surface. And note, this is the last episode to take place in 1 BBY. That's 1 year before the Battle of Yavin. So we are officially less than a year, technically, before the events of Rogue One. That being said, this is Rebels Recon.
Old school fans would likely recognize Thrawn's assassin Rukh from the classic Thrawn trilogy books.
Maybe.
How is it decided to bring another Legends character into the series?
I mean, once you start with Thrawn, it kind of sets off some dominoes, and we needed another character that wasn't a force-wielding character, so we decided on Rukh. It wasn't an easy choice, because it's not really a good idea of what he looks like. There have been a lot of interpretations.
We actually did a complete pass that was green. He looked a lot more like a T-Rex, but Filoni had this idea. He was thinking more creepy and skeletal, and he wanted Rukh to be sort of wiry and menacing in a way that was different to an Inquisitor or a Vader. So we actually went back and went more in this sort of gray, alien, spooky, pale-eyed sort of direction.
I remember talking to Killian about him when we first started designing him. We were figuring, does he more do a four-legged thing? Does he actually run like a gorilla? We kind of went with that as his sort of basic idea for his locomotion, that he's much more animal-like. So you'll see a lot of times that he'll be going from 4 legs to 2 legs. He'll be grappling onto things like a monkey to kind of give him a little bit more of a creature kind of feel and less of a normal biped human assassin.
We were finessing the fine points of Rukh all the way deep into lighting. Even though the design was great, the asset's great, as soon as we get him into lighting, that's where things pop up. One of them is his button nose. Before, the button nose used to be a little bright, and it made him look a little too cute. And Dave had the immediate reaction of, let's just darken the nose. So we had to go and in the color grade just darken his nose there. But just by doing that, just added so much more menacing fear to his face with his expressions.
What else can you tell us about Rukh and his species? What kind of culture do they have?
The Nogri are very honor-based. They're the size of Jawas, but they're deadly, so they're really more like ninjas than they are brutes. The key thing that they had in the books is this incredible sense of smell. They could actually tell your lineage by sniffing you. They could figure out what your bloodline is if you were related to someone. In this case, we really just tried to project that as Rukh being a tracker.
We finally got Warwick Davis into Rebels. What's it like working with Warwick as a voice actor?
He is incredible. It was such a pleasure to record him. He was great because he gave a very nuanced performance with his voice, but he's also incredibly physical. So we recorded his physical performance as well, and we gave that to the animators. So a lot of the subtle nuances he made with his face and his body, you'll actually see reflected in Rukh.
He is as supremely knowledgeable as an actor as you could want. He has such a breadth of experience behind him to draw from. It's when your days are easy as a director, because anything you give an actor like him, he will just take and make pretty incredible. There is a legacy in Star Wars that goes beyond just the stories and the characters to the people behind the scenes that have been a part of this, and he's definitely been a gigantic part of Star Wars and why I think people love it. So it's just always fun when they can continue to be included in the magic here.
We get to see Zeb finally meet his match in a fight in this episode. What's your process for recording all these grunts and groans needed for this sort of performance?
The grunting and groaning is something I started out with. My very first gig was as a creature going, you got to be willing to look ugly. That is the secret to all efforts at being gross as you possibly can.
How exactly does the Mining Guild work with the Empire?
The Mining Guild has all the equipment and gear required to exploit planets. They're kind of this independent agency that the Empire hasn't completely taken over.
Well, they're brought in to strip the place, all the resources, and They're just there making money. They don't see it as villainous. They're just doing their job.
Captain Seafor is kind of an interesting character. Can you tell me a little bit more about his origins?
He was voiced by the fantastic Seth Green.
He's so good.
He was phenomenal. He came in and we didn't really know what the voice was going to be like. And Seth gave us a couple of options. And the minute we heard that voice, it was like, perfect, that is Captain Seafor.
Trandoshans in general are fun to design because once you get past the idea that they all have to look just like Bosk, it's wide open. They can be anything as long as they're lizards. There's actually a massive amount of just visual diversity that you can try within any one given species in Star Wars and come up with really fun, different characters that don't break any rules and are just as believable and interesting as anything that you've seen in the movies.
This episode made a lot of online fans very happy.
Including me.
Yeah, I think a lot of us were waiting for Kanan and Hera to finally kiss. What took them so long to finally get to this point in the relationship?
They've had a history together, but Hera was very focused on the rebellion.
I think in a different time, in a different world, maybe they really would have explored more of that. But I think as the circumstances grow even more dire and it becomes even more dangerous, I think the attraction increases as well. I think they've had other priorities and have not been able to be romantic with one another, but I do think that that feeling is there.
They really help each other, and I think that for a long time, we just didn't want this relationship to get in the way of how they were developing as characters. It's evolved the way that it should, and we were just very careful about it. It's suggested every now and then that they have more of a history in the past, but we'll have to wait and see what it means in their future.
All right. Well, hey, there's Dave confirming that, you know, they haven't exactly had a crazy romantic relationship in the past. So we got our first episode where that's starting to come out, you know?
Yeah, I guess they had to explain it because we've mentioned so many times where this was already kindled in the book before the first episode, and then was just completely dropped until I'd say probably season 3.
Yeah.
One moment and then dropped again until season 4.
Yeah. I think I have an even bigger complaint though. And I'll save it for the next Rebels talk that we do because it's more relevant for that one. But just going forward,
foreshadowing.
Yeah, going forward though, I'd like everyone to remember this is the only and first time in the series that we've ever seen them show romantic, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Like notation,
intentions.
Notions or intentions to one another.
Intentions.
Yeah, which gives me, it provides me the idea in that scene. You know, when that happens, it provides me the idea that this has not happened behind the curtain. This is like we're watching this moment unfold, similarly to a Leia Han moment in Empire Strikes Back. You know, like I think that's supposed to be the moment here because Sabine taps Zeb on the shoulder and you know, they kind of look over and it's like, I think that's supposed to be it. Like this is supposed to be kind of that gateway. They're finally through the door. You know, we're rooting for them as a, you know, as Andy was saying, you know, like a couple, I guess. Right. But I have a complaint about it. And it's relevant to the next episode only, so I'll save it. But
all right.
Yeah,
man, just leave me hanging there.
Yeah. You'll get it as soon as we start talking about it in the next episode. But yeah, it is what it is.
All right, I'll hold out.
Rukh, or Rukh, as Thrawn pronounces it, is a Nagri, and you know, all I could think about, because Dave is such a Lord of the Rings fan. All I could think about this entire time, anytime I saw this guy, was just how Gollum-y he is. Like he's such
he's kind of schmeagly.
Yeah, he's got such a smeagly kind of Gollum-y kind of look and feel about him. He runs on all fours, but he stands on two. Right. You know, he can climb really well. He's got a crazy good nose. He's very very creature-like. He's got the buggy eyes.
Describing Gollum.
Yeah. Plus, they make all these like in one of the episodes at least, like Zeb is cracking ugly jokes about Rukh, right? And they're like, "Ugh, what is that thing?" Like, you know, they take one look at him as like they're looking at an ogre. It's like, but it reminds me of that scene where like Frodo's like, Gandalf, what is that? What does he say? What does he say again? You know, he's just like,
what is he talking?
It's when he sees
Smeagol and he's sneaking after them.
Yeah. I think it's when they're in the caves, right? Doesn't he say like, what is that, or something? You know,
what is that vile creature?
Yeah.
I think he mainly says like something's following us.
Yeah.
Then,
Right.
And then Gandalf kind of explains and also mentions how Bilbo ran into him, and then Frodo's like, "Oh, I pity him."
Yeah. Well, also when Bilbo runs into him for the first time, like he's creeped out. Like this dude is, you know, he's ugly. He's just like, he's hideous to look at. He's a monster. And, you know, there's some, there's some story there as to why that is, of course. But like, I think, you know, the unfortunate part of Rukh is he's just born that way. So, you know, he's not an attractive alien species, that's for sure. And they kind of designed him, you know, they talked extensively about how they designed him to be that way. But I would not want to visit the planet that he's from, man. Like, you know.
So I didn't realize, because I hadn't read the Thrawn trilogy in a long time.
Yeah.
That he is actually a character from the Thrawn trilogy, and his race is from the Thrawn trilogy.
Yeah, from the original EU Legends trilogy, that is. Yeah. So if I'm not mistaken, in the original story, right, the Legends continuity, I believe it's Rukh who actually kills Thrawn.
Yeah, that's right. So I pulled up the Wikipedia because I was curious here, and just a little bonus moment here. So when I was trying to get the spelling right, the first one that came up was Bodhi Rukh. I'm like, oh, that must be it. Click on it, and
Bodhi.
That's the pilot for Rogue One.
Cargo pilot.
They're both called Rukh, apparently.
I think I could do that impression.
I thought that was kind of funny.
Bodhi. Rukh. Cargo pilot. Poker. Yeah.
Squadron? What squadron? Rogue Squadron.
So what?
Anyway, let me read this backstory of Rukh here from the EU real quick, because I thought it was really interesting. So Rukh was a male Nogri warrior who served as a personal bodyguard and then later the assassin of Grand Admiral Thrawn. Raised at a time when his homeworld Honogor was ravaged by ecological disaster, Rukh was fiercely loyal to the Galactic Empire, which claimed to be working to restore the planet. But this is as actual fact, the Empire actually poisoned the planet, which is interesting because I think that was reused in the Princess Leia novel. Anyway, after serving as one of the Emperor Palpatine's Nogri Death Commandos, Rukh was handpicked by Thrawn in 9 ABY to serve as his bodyguard, traveling the galaxy aboard Thrawn's flagship, the Imperial-class Star Destroyer Chimera. A deadly and stealthy warrior, Rukh was often at Thrawn's side while the Grand Admiral waged his military campaign against the New Republic. He was present with Thrawn during several important missions, including the recruitment of the Dark Jedi Joruus C'baoth on the planet Wayland. Rukh accompanied Thrawn to Honogor to interrogate the Nogri. After his failure to capture Princess Leia Organa, Rukh unsuccessfully attempted to stop the Jedi Luke Skywalker from breaking the smuggler. It goes on and on. But I did not realize that this was a character that was in the novel for so long.
Right. Yeah, and I'm reading. I just read a little bit ahead, and it does confirm he does kill Grand Admiral Thrawn. He drives his assassin's knife through Thrawn's chest and kills him.
Because he I believe it's because he finds out that the Empire, which was saying they were restoring the Nogri homeworld, actually were the ones that poisoned it in the first place, and then came in as the saviors from their own poisoning to come in and offer help in exchange for recruiting them as these commandos.
Right. Yeah, it says,
I might be getting a bit mixed up.
No, you're right. It says
in this novel.
Yeah, it says Rukh soon learned that Thrawn was not actually restoring Honogri, but was secretly keeping it in a state of poor health so that the Nagri would remain perpetually indebted and effectively enslaved to the Empire. So he was so furious about this that he killed the Grand Admiral. Yeah, but this story is like, this is the EU Legends continuity, of course, for anyone who's confused. So, you know, they kind of skip over all that stuff and they just assume that none of that kind of fits into the current canon. Like, they've ignored all that. We don't really know what canon backstory Rukh has, or his home world, you know, or maybe what it's called, because, you know, they could rename it to something else. So who knows? But yeah, what were you saying? Sorry, before about the book.
I'm trying to remember. So I think I might be wrong about this, but I think I might be getting mixed up with the Leia novel, because I think in this, the rebellion tries to help, and Princess Leia is leading it. She's trying to convince them that the Empire's behind poisoning and whatever, but they don't trust her because they find out she was related to Darth Vader. I might be getting that mixed up. I'm not sure if they reused that or not in the new novel.
Maybe. I don't recall these species showing up in Bloodline, but you might be referring to some elements that showed up in Bloodline.
Oh no, sorry. I mean just the storyline with Princess Leia being found out to be related to Darth Vader.
Yeah, that was the focus of the story, the canon book in Bloodline, but I don't recall any kind of planet with poisoned or anything like it. It was about a planet that was actually trying to recruit forces for like a militia, which was supposed to hint at the fact that the First Order was kind of building resources on other planets somewhere. But yeah, that's sort of a non-Thrawn related incident. But if that's what you're thinking of, that is.
Might be. It's been a while. I need to reread these books. They're really good. I've read them twice, but it's been, years. So
yeah. Okay, so what ship is that they're riding around in? Like the one that Ryder has, the one that Ryder's riding in,
the speeder.
The speeder. It looks like a U-wing, but without the big, huge fin wing things. The scissor wings. It looks like a U-wing without those. Like what? Like, do you know what that is?
I think it is that. No, I think it is that. I think just the wings are in the. I don't know what they call it, because I don't really know why the wings move back. So,
Well,
I don't know if they move faster.
Yeah, I honestly have no idea. Yeah,
it's in the forward position, right? It's a U-wing with the wings in the forward position.
But that's the thing, is like the wings aren't there. Like there's like some little. It almost looks like a snow speeder with the bottom half and the back half of a U-wing. So it's so weird looking that I was like, man, I wonder what that is. And here, I'll hold on. Let me just send a photo here.
Because I didn't notice that. But I did notice that it only has 2 of 4 engines.
Yeah, so if you take a good look, it's like there's no scissor wings on this thing, because the U-wing, when the wings are forward facing, they stick out quite far, right? But then when the U-wing has the wings behind them, it's kind of trailing like these fins on the back, right? But this ship doesn't have either. Like it's kind of It's like a U-wing without the wings on it. So I was wondering like what it is, and they don't refer to it as anything in the episodes themselves.
Just modified.
However, I think I found it. It is calling it a U-wing. It says at the rebel
it's
camp,
definitely a U-wing.
Sabine Wren states that she should just be able to install the hyperdrive on Ryder Azadi's U-wing, but that's since the ship is old, it may not work. Okay, so if it is a U-wing though, like why does it look so different compared to the ones that we get in?
It's got shorter wings.
Is that all?
So they just don't stick out as far. Yeah, because even in if this is real, maybe this is a fan-made one, but I found like a model of the ship, of this specific U-wing, and it appears to be from the X-Wing game by FFG, and it has the short wings that we see in the like V position where it's behind the ship. So it looks, if this is real, this might be a fan-made.
Okay, because I found a Wikipedia entry called UT-60D U-Wing Starfighter, and it's got the really, really long wings and 4 engines. So that must be the one that we get in Rogue One, right? So I'm guessing maybe that this is just like a different class.
Yeah, that's also... We also see it in Rebels when it's flown by Saw.
Right, exactly, yeah. The subtext to the picture of, it's a screenshot of when the U-Wing lands on Yavin in front of Mon Mothma, and it's referred to as an older model U-Wing landing at Masasi base. So it seems to me that it's a type of U-Wing that is undescript. It's like undescribed, like model wise. But hey, if anyone out there listening knows exactly what this is, like what model it is, and kind of more about it, you know, definitely shoot us an email with the link to the Wikipedia page, because it would be cool to read up about it. Just noticed it was so different than the standard U-Wing, but it's pretty cool. It's a unique.
It's an older model, sir, but it checks out.
It's an older model, but it checks out, sir. The space station things above Lothal are super cool, and they're called construction spheres. So when they escape Lothal, you know, with this hyperdrive thing, did you notice there's these giant kind of UFO-looking space station things with these arms sticking out? They're basically like space cranes. And
is that what it is? I was wondering, because they have to fly past them when they're trying to escape.
They are, yeah. So they're basically...
I didn't know what they were.
Yeah, they're space cranes. And there's 2 fun facts here for you. So in Rogue One Catalyst, the novel Catalyst, a Rogue One novel, they were first identified in the book as orbital command habitats. So they were referred to as a different name in the book, but they're intended to be the same thing. So space cranes, construction spheres, orbital command habitats, they're all the same thing, and they look like that. And the second fun fact is Ralph McQuarrie designed these.
Oh, what?
And drew them as objects floating in space that were assisting in the construction of the Death Star. Which is so interesting to me to see Ralph McQuarrie painting pictures of an incomplete Death Star, because, you know, I believe these are, you know, images for A New Hope, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe in some early drafts, maybe it just wasn't finished. So I think it's really cool that in Rogue One, they actually make an effort to visually depict them still putting the final touches on the Death Star, because it takes place so close to the events of A New Hope that it sort of honors the original artwork that depicted this thing as an incomplete project. And the space cranes are such a great idea, because it really kind of fills in a bit of gaps. You know, when we talk about Wookiees built the Death Star, and Geonosians built the Death Star, and, you know, slaves built the Death Star, and like small robots and droids that we saw in episode 3 at the very end of the movie. But, you know, the big panels, you know, those that, you know, just kind of did a lot of the big, huge kind of construction work sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, there's these giant, basically floating space cranes called construction spheres. So you got a good look at those surrounding Lothal in this episode. So I thought it was pretty neat.
This show, I feel like it wasn't really written to be a show to explain going into A New Hope. It was a show just to use basically just take all of Ralph McQuarrie's designs that weren't used and put them on screen.
Oh, like 110%. Yeah, totally.
Man, I'm just looking through Ralph McQuarrie art here, and I didn't realize how many of his designs they took and put into the sequel trilogy.
Yeah,
what the heck?
A decent amount, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like the X-Wing, the T-70, the new version. That's the original design that Ralph McQuarrie did.
Yeah, I remember that was a big deal when they revealed that ship.
Yeah.
When they revealed that ship on, I think it was J.J. Abrams. He was doing like a promotional thing, you know, when they were still shooting the movie. And they showed a full-size kind of X-Wing that they built, you know, with Oscar Isaac was hanging off of it. And I think they had J.J. Abrams there. He was taking a photo. And they made an effort to really hype up the idea that, you know, we're going back to the original version of Ralph's designs. And, this is like an improved version. Now it only needs 2 engines instead of 4, and it was pretty cool. It's
still 4.
It's a cool looking. Well, yeah, 4, but it's like when the wings are closed, it looks like 2, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like it's a
exactly.
pretty neat. It's a neat design, and that's something I did actually like about the movie was they
pulled that design work. Yeah,
it's always cool.
The other big one. The other big one I'm looking at here is the original design for the Death Star. I'm looking at the artwork with the Y-wing flying towards it. The Death Star here looks like what's it called, the planet in
planet where?
Well, what's the name of it now? Starkiller Base. It looks like the Starkiller Base laser as opposed to the Death Star.
Oh yeah. They actually did reuse this element with the Y-wings in one of the later Clone Wars episodes, I think. When they attack that big huge base on the planet, which ends up being blown up in Star Wars Rebels, and we never find out how it blew up. But there's like a big huge planetary like bomb in that thing. It's the episode with Mace Windu and Obi-Wan and Anakin, and it's the final episode that we see the spider guy. What's his name again?
Oh, right.
Yeah. You know what I'm talking about.
He's the cyborg spider alien.
Yeah, they are. Well.
Yeah, that guy.
That guy. Yeah.
Who's all the way back from season 1.
Yeah.
He's still there.
Exactly. Trench, Admiral Trench. The design for the Y-wing flying towards that big huge Death Star in the Ralph McQuarrie drawing. They pretty much reused that shot, I believe, at some point in that episode, and they kind of like stylized something on that planet after it, I believe. I could be thinking of a different episode, but I'm pretty sure it was that one. But the wolves and the cave and Kanan, the magic of the cave traverses them to the other side of the planet, and it almost looks like a hyperspace effect, like while they're kind of traveling through the forest. But
bit early, but it looked to me like, hold on, I gotta hit the thing. This might be spoilers for this show for later down the road.
Yeah.
To me, it looked like they're in the world between worlds.
Yeah, it looked like the world between worlds, but like it's world between worlds. Like you get lots of like blues and like then streaks, and then you get like the starry effect, and you hear all the voices, and it was cool. Like and when they come out the other side, they're like, oh, what did you Sabine was like, did you hear those voices? So it's unclear whether or not they all heard the same voices, because I think the voices that we were hearing, they were all of like Ahsoka and Kanan, and I assume we're seeing it from Ezra's point of view, but it's possible Sabine heard those same voices as well. If not, maybe she heard somebody else. Who knows, right? Like they all kind of had like their own moment, as they kind of dazedly traversed through the world between worlds on the backs of these Loth Wolves. So it was pretty cool. And the wolf who speaks to Kanan walks back into the wall and disappears. And when it disappears into that cave wall, we see a drawing of the Jedi Temple on Lothal with a big crack in it, and kind of like drawings on the outside, and the crack almost kind of appearing to me like a doorway. So I was like, that's pretty cool foreshadowing. This whole episode was really, really well done, in terms of foreshadowing kind of what is to come in the next like 3 or 4 episodes of the show. So
yeah, that is a good point. Very interesting.
Very cool.
There's a lot of foreshadowing, like force spookiness in this series, I'm noticing.
Yeah, there is.
Bendu also did the same thing for Thrawn, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, they're getting a little better about kind of planning ahead, I think, with some of the stuff. I'm gonna jump ahead to the next one, just to kind of finish off our arc here. And they find, after they kind of come out of that cave, they see a big ore crawler, And this ore crawler reminded me so much of the original Genndy Clone Wars series. There's a short that happens in Volume 1 of Star Wars Clone Wars. And it's a short with Mace Windu kind of jumping up onto, he's in the plains of this grasslands planet. And there's a boy on the hill with a small hat kind of watching this whole event transpire before him. And there's thousands upon thousands of battle droids, like in this giant field, fighting clone troopers and so on and so forth. And Mace Windu just kind of like dives into the midst of it, you know, tearing up droids and stuff like that. And then this giant, like, kind of beige colored hovercraft, which is shaped very similarly to the ore crawler that we see in this episode, but even bigger, comes along, and it has this big, huge, like, thing underneath it, which stamps the ground, and it causes like a giant, like, tidal wave of dirt and dust and wipes out clones and droids alike. And all I could think about was that episode or that short, you know, of Star Wars Clone Wars, which is no longer canon, but is, you know, the Genndy. Everybody who's of a certain age, you know, will remember the original Clone Wars cartoon network.
Yeah, I'm completely. As soon as you started talking about the original Clone Wars, I knew exactly what you were going to talk about.
Yeah. Okay, so you know what I'm
talking about that machine from the Mesa Windu, yeah.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. That. Yeah, so like it just reminded me so much of that, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. And what did you think of the little Trandoshan? You know, Seth Green plays
scrawny one,
scrawny Weasley Trandoshan. I thought he was so funny. Like, just it's not often that we see a skinny, scrawny Trandoshan. They're normally depicted as quite large creatures that could like fight a Wookiee or something. But
yeah, well, that's what they often do, right?
Yeah,
they're neighboring planets. So
this
they would
guy
go over there and enslave all the Wookiees. But yeah,
this guy was just being tossed around like a rag doll by everybody. You know, it's quite funny.
I was trying to remember if we've seen a Trandoshan like this before.
Yeah, we've seen so many. We've seen quite a variety. I mean, even Sid, right? Sid is a very different looking Trandoshan as well. But we've seen quite the variety. I don't think I've ever seen one quite like this. Like this guy was quite funny. He's got his feet up on the dash. You know, listen to the Zeb Rock song.
Listen to tunes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny.
Listen to Jedi Rocks.
Yeah. What I thought was so ridiculous though is he's such a problem through this whole episode, and all it could have taken was just a lightsaber through the back of his chair, or you know, a typical Zeb clobbering over the head, you know. But his eventual death is hilarious. You know, he just kind of trips on the hilt of Ezra's lightsaber, unactivated by the way, and then falls like, you know, back first into a refinery.
You're skipping ahead there, but yeah,
I just thought it was hilarious.
I get why they didn't attack him outright, because he was unarmed and distracted. That's not very Jedi-like. As for Zeb hitting him in the head, I mean, that would have worked, and he did it later, but it didn't, you know, keep him incapacitated.
Yeah.
As for the death scene, though, yeah, Ezra was comically happy about him dying, which I thought was very uncharacteristic of a Jedi.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Vizago shows up in this episode again. It's been a while since we saw him.
Yeah, I was not expecting that.
We sort of forgot about him, didn't we? Like, you know, he gets captured by the Empire, and all the rebels are running away. They'll be like, oh, he'll be all right. And you know, it seems like he's a good guy now. It seems, you know, he calls them friends, and he's happy when they show up to. He thinks he's they came for him kind of thing, but it's like a happy accident. What do you think of his character transformation? You know, this is the end of the story for.
Is it transformation though?
Well, he was a bit.
I feel like it was more. He was very slimy.
Yeah.
Like he was even a slaver, right? And then we'll get to this point. I think he just, because he helped him get to the planet, and he knows they're good people that were going to get him out. I don't think he's necessarily changed his ways. I think he just was expecting opportunistic savior, like to be saved by them, basically. Like they'd feel bad and they come get him out, sort of situation.
Well, when he helps out the rebels initially to get them to Lothal in the first place, like he you know, he pulls a pretty big solid for them, but he just seems a bit more cheerful. You know, he's just like less kind of
that's true, but
shady
why?
and depressed a little bit. Like he's no longer like. Well, that's the thing is like I don't really know. It just seems like something's changed in him as a character, and he just seems a bit different. But, anyways, the attack is approved by the end of this episode by the rebellion. The defenders must be destroyed. You know, Hera convinces the rebellion that this is a tactical move that they must pull off. And in the Rebels Recon episode, you know, maybe one of the last things we can touch up on here before we wrap up is kind of how the defenders really could have changed the entire course of the war. Because a really interesting point that they made was the rebellion relies completely upon the idea that even though they have less ships, they can last longer in battle because they have the hyperdrives, they've got shields, you know, and ideally they have better pilots, right? And Thrawn's whole thing is let's make better ships so that even our pilots can do well in battle, last longer, and, you know, with the money behind the Empire, you know, they can mass produce these things and completely overwhelm the fledgling rebellion fleet, right? So his tactics are really like, you know, well thought of, right? I think the rebels would have lost if they had TIE defenders defending the Death Star instead of TIE fighters. I don't think maybe they wouldn't have made it, right? But then of course there's Luke Skywalker's the wild card there. Like maybe it, you know, still would have happened. But it's just like one of those things that you just kind of gets you thinking. It's like, oh, how different would have things ended up if they did have these vehicles at their disposal in the masses, right?
That's a good question. It's funny that the writers of the show actually think that the rebellion would have failed if Thrawn had gotten his way with these ships and got them into full production.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, you know, another thing to add on to that is, you know, with how we know the show to end up, right? And, you know, we don't need to talk specifics, but clearly, as we already know, Thrawn's not around for the events of the original trilogy, but he's popping back up again, as we've seen in the Ahsoka trailer. So his absence of the events of the original trilogy have devastated the Empire. You know, like without him, without their master tactician, the Empire has essentially lost the war. And I think if the Empire had Thrawn throughout the events of the movies that we're familiar with, you know, in another life, that is, things could have gone very differently for Palpatine, you know, for his
I didn't even think about that.
Right? You know, that's not even mentioning the like, we already talked about the absence of the TIE defenders and how that changed the game. Thrawn alone is also like a huge loss. Like without him, they could have done so much better if they did have him around, but they didn't. And they lost Tarkin as well.
That's true. They have lost basically all of their main leaders by the time we get to episode 6.
Yeah.
See, I think Palpatine kind of commands the whole thing himself, right? Because other than that, I guess all you really see is.
Well, he's got other Moffs. I mean, like
Admiral
we know, like
Piet.
Well, we've got other Moffs out there. You know, clearly, you know, Moff Gideon is one of them. But they're lesser known people, and they're Moffs, right? Like, you know, Tarkin is a what he's a grand he's a what is he again?
Grand Moff. Yeah.
He's Grand Moff, right? Yeah, Grand Moff.
Yeah, he was the first Grand Moff. So if you read the Tarkin novel, he gets to design the uniform because he was the first one.
Right. So he's Grand Moff. They lost him. They lost their Grand Admiral. You know, they lost their Grand Inquisitor. They lost all their grand people. And, you know, I think that really kind of one by one, that kind of affected them very heavily. And without the events or without the presence of Thrawn in the Imperial ranks, I think that's kind of what helped the rebellion win the war, is that the Empire didn't have their most valuable asset.
No, that's a good point because he disappears more or less.
Yeah.
But as soon as the rebellion really starts to take off is when Thrawn disappears. So it's really the worst possible time for the Empire. So it benefited the rebels extensively.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And the time that he's been,
I'm just wondering then if I was just saying, I wonder then if that makes Ezra more of the chosen one than Anakin.
Yeah, who knows? You know, and like that's the thing is like as we know the series to wrap up. I mean, maybe we can just kind of briefly spoil it because like I think you mentioned it last time on the podcast, anyways, about all the cold embrace. But Ezra and Thrawn are sent out into the great unknown. You know, and Ezra essentially sort of creating a bit of a sacrificial moment at the end. And it's just kind of, it takes them out of the picture, right? And they can't be in the picture because there's not supposed to be another Jedi in the picture while Luke is around. And Grand Admiral Thrawn, because he's such a big player, you know, he can't be floating around either because that would change the logic of what's going on in the original trilogy. So how do you do it, right? And I think Dave's best option,
got to get rid of him somehow. Ahsoka as well.
Exactly, Ahsoka as well, because that's the whole like, you know, and we'll get into that of course when that comes up. But like the whole world between worlds thing, like you mentioned before, like, you know, and with the ability to kind of travel through space and time, as we've seen demonstrated in these episodes here with the wolves taking them from one side of the planet to the other. It kind of changes the game a little bit as far as like how they can kind of get these characters out of the way so that it doesn't change what we already know to happen in these movies that we have known for 40 years now, but to also create new stories with these new characters and, you know, EU Legends characters bring back into canon earlier points in time and really just kind of allowing them to be absent from those stories and then bringing them back in again for this show for Ahsoka, right? So that's part of the reason why I started off with this episode, you know, saying a lot of what happens here, you know, we're going to be segueing into Ahsoka so easily, so nicely, because, you know, like already we've talked about, you know, just all of this stuff with Thrawn's absence and the TIE Defenders. You know, it's like, I feel like it's something that we can kind of perhaps see some sort of consequence, you know, when these characters show up again, because really that's sort of the follow-up, right? And, you know, like we only have one shot of, you know, Lars Mikkelsen as Thrawn, as his character, and he looks fantastic, but I just can't wait to, you know, see kind of what he's been up to. It's been 10 years, you know, it's been 10 years since he and Ezra kind of go away, and like I'm sure we'll get into this more in the finale of the Rebels show. But
and on top of that, like this is now in the era that the original Thrawn trilogy took place in. So
yeah,
from that perspective as well, is I think very exciting to see. I'd still say that the Thrawn trilogy by Timothy Zahn is some of my favorite Star Wars novels. So I'm quite excited to see if they take the opportunity to maybe head towards recanonizing some of the better EU stories.
Oh yeah, that would be so cool. Yeah.
Well, one thing I wanted to mention that, you know, on your whole spiel here, you talked about how they need to get rid of the Jedi so Luke can show up and be the only one. Because of how tightly this timeline is, it's kind of annoying that it's like they have Ezra and Ahsoka and Kanan, and they're all at. Actually, I'm not sure where Ahsoka's at right now because she's disappeared after the fight with Vader. But she was part of the rebellion, and now Kanan and Ezra are still around, and they're at Yavin base, and then they disappear, and then like the next day Luke shows up, so it's like he just missed seeing them by a couple of days. Like what happened? Like it's just it's an annoying lineup of events, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, I guess we can.
Lucas. It's because Luke was led to be, when we watched the original trilogy, the only Jedi, like the last Jedi is trying to like piece all these things together, right?
Yeah.
And he seems like he helps, and he's such a positive influence and benefits the rebellion so much because he has these Jedi abilities. And lo and behold, now he was no longer the only Jedi in the rebellion to help them win. He was just a kind of a crappy replacement for the two previous Jedi that were there a week ago.
Well, and we know now that it's not even just Ezra and Kanan. Like, we know that there's been numerous Jedi that survived the Purge and have progressively over the 19-year gap between episode 3 and 4 have assisted the rebellion in some way or another. So, you know, we know that Cal Kestis is, of course, a really big name Jedi in the Jedi game series, and he is instrumental in the early days of the Rebel cells, you know, working with Saw Gerrera and, you know, eventually falling into league with the Path, the Hidden Path for the Jedi, smuggling Jedi out of harm's way, as well as his master Seer and you know, another and her master. So 3 Jedi all alive in that kind of early story, helping build the rebellion in a way that, well, fighting as a cell, you know, in itself, but then also kind of helping the rebellion from the roots, right? And then, you know, flash forward later to Obi-Wan Kenobi, and you get the outcome of what that path does for people like Obi-Wan,
yeah.
like, and you know, you meet characters like what's his face, you know, Ice Cube's son, you know, the actor.
I'm not sure his name, but I
forget
know who you're
his
talking about.
Yeah. You know, it's like, it's at that point, 5 years later, it's like more established as like, this is how we save, you know, Force sensitive children now that are being hunted by Inquisitors and by the Empire. And not to mention the fact that, you know, these rebel cells are becoming more frequent, you know, as a collective, right? And then, you know, flash forward again 5 years, Andor, you know, we get Andor, the story building there. And then flash forward another 5 years and you get Star Wars Rebels happening, and you get 2 Jedi in that story, which is Kanan and Ezra, you know, helping the rebellion at that point in time. So the rebellion really wouldn't be what it is if it didn't have the Jedi influence. And I think that's why the rebellion has stuck to the phrase of the Jedi. It was like, may the Force be with you, because it's such a deep-rooted thing to have, like the assistance of the Jedi throughout the rebellion. But it's true. Like, by the time you get to A New Hope, it's been a year since, or nearly a year, you know, since they last had a Jedi in their midst. And that's why Mon Mothma kind of whispers to Bail Organa, like, because she knows about Obi-Wan, you know, and kind of asks him, like, you know, can we get help from your Jedi friend? And for her, it's not like a weird thing to ask that, because she knows that the Jedi are powerful people, and she knows that they can be helpful. She knows that they can do some good. And so I think that's probably something that motivates her to do that, is probably because she knows what they can do. And, you know, going from there, you know, you have Luke kind of being brought up as not only just a new hope for the Jedi Order, you know, as it stands, but Obi-Wan, as we know, very shortly dies after he kind of brings Luke into the rebellion. So now it's really just him. And, you know, as far as Yoda knows, he doesn't know where Ezra is. He doesn't know where Ahsoka is, and she doesn't call herself a Jedi anyway. So, like, really, who's left, right? So from a certain point of view, you know, he is sort of the last Jedi at the point of which Yoda dies, and kind of tells him that.
Right.
And he says, like, you know, the last of the Jedi you will be. And, you know, he's speaking of people who are kind of within his presence, that, you know, within the existing turn of events, that can actually do anything about it before it gets too late.
Can actually make a difference.
Yeah, Luke is that only person. He's the only person. He's always only ever been the only person that could do anything. You know, like, he's the only person that can redeem Vader. You know, Yoda and Obi-Wan were convinced that he was the only person that could restore the order. And
because they so conveniently overlooked Leia.
yeah, exactly. And then, oh, by the way, we've got a sister.
That's right. The backup for the backup plan.
Right. Pablo points of Poodoos. I think I would give this one, this arc, 2 Pablo points. I think it was.
Is it really an arc though? I just feel like it was 2 episodes.
It does feel like 2 episodes, but one of them segues into the other, and the Rebels Recon tied both of these together. I mean, if I was to award scores for each of them, though, the first one, Kindred, with the TIE Defender being stolen, we had the whole Rukh kind of like chase scene with
mostly
Ezra and Jai on the speeder. Yeah, it was
mostly
okay.
introduction for him. Yeah,
I would have probably given that one probably a 1 Pablo point, and then the second one, Crawler Commandeers, probably would have been. I like that one actually. It was quite fun. I think I'll be nice. I'll give it 2 Pablo points. I think it was pretty great.
Star Wars escape pod has just been intercepted by the Separatist Alliance. If you are tuning in right now, don't go anywhere. Leave a review and make it a good one.
You want some soup?
I found that the first episode, even though it had more story elements of kind of leading into where the arcs are going, kind of more an introduction to Bodhi Rukh and showing the Loth Wolves and how they have the ability to use the Force and go through hyperspace or whatever it is to get them to the new base location after being found by the Empire. I enjoyed watching it, but looking back on it, it feels like not a lot happened, which is funny because the second episode was very fillery because it didn't really accomplish anything, but it was a lot of fun. So I found myself enjoying that quite a bit more than the first one.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Similar to you, I think. Yeah, probably a 1 for the first one, and I don't want to copy you exactly, so I'm going to say 2 and 3/16.
Gotcha. All right, yeah.
Basically,
Cool.
basically the same score as you.
Right. Not quite. Yeah. Well, it's close enough. I mean, those are pretty good ones, and they're getting better. They're getting better as we're going down the list here. So I'm looking forward to, when we get around to episode 9, Rebel Assault, and kind of what follows from there is all juicy stuff. So
yeah, because I know just watching along the series here as we keep these podcasts coming out, it does seem like from this point onward, everything just keeps ramping up more and more. So it seems like we're really kicking off like the true heart of this show. It's been really exciting.
Oh yeah, I fully agree. Awesome. Well, we gave our Pablo points of Poodoos. We wrapped up 4 episodes of Rebels on today's Rebels Talk episode. Is there anything you want to say before we wrap things up here, or shall we segue out?
Well, the following, even this episode, is going to come out after Ahsoka. So I'm really curious how this is all going to tie directly into it, especially what happens in the next 2 episodes. I'm really curious how that's going to directly lead into it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I'm with you there.
So, with this episode coming out, we're recording it before Ahsoka, but it's going to be released after Ahsoka. So I'm curious, looking backwards on it, how it's all going to play out.
Yeah.
We're going to look the fools for our theories after something come out or not.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well said. All right, man. As always, it's been a pleasure. And with the Separatists increasingly trying to infringe on our broadcast, we will call it here.
Well, what we should have done? We should have just tried to find some sort of crawler and try to steal their antenna array so we could boost our signal.
Yeah, we should have. Yeah. Yeah. Oh man. All right, buddy. We'll catch you in the next one.
Sounds good. We'll see you out there. Keep playing.
All right. Thank you so much for all of you tuning in. And before we go,
Star Wars escape pod has just been intercepted by the Separatist Alliance. If you are tuning in right now, don't go anywhere. Leave a review and make it a good one.
that would help us out a lot. And for those of you who have stuck with us so far in Star Wars Rebels, thank you so much for being with us. You could drop a 5-star review. That'd be fantastic. Our socials are in the description below. Always check down there for the episodes that we're watching next. And because this will release after Ahsoka, we hope you guys enjoyed the premiere. Look for our after shows on that, and may the Force be with you.